I'm Maeve DuVally, and my book is Maeve Rising, Coming Out Trans in Corporate America. So in 2019, the New York Times wrote a story about my coming out experience at Goldman Sachs. And so this book's about what it took to get me to that point. And it took a lot. Well, first of all, I had to get sober. I've had a drinking problem for most of my life, and I believe I probably would not have realized who I was if I was still drinking. I was almost driven to go back and look at my life now through a sober lens and an out transgender lens, because for most of my life, those two things were not part of my identity. I believe that deep within me, I knew I was transgender, but I did not consciously know I was transgender until October of 2018. I was working a recovery program, and in the course of working a recovery program, I had this sudden realization, a conscious realization that I was transgender. Generally speaking, people don't come out because they're concerned about being accepted. When I realized I was transgender in October of 2018, I came out in my social life immediately, but for whatever reason, I wasn't comfortable coming out at Goldman Sachs for another 7 or 8 months. So I was living a double life, and for me it was 7 or 8 months. For some transgender people, it's years and decades, but it all comes down to acceptance, that fear that if you are yourself, maybe you won't be accepted by those around you. On the Tuesday after Memorial Day in 2019, when I walked into Goldman Sachs as Maeve for the first time, that was perhaps the most exciting day of my life. I was just floating on air. It was just such a special day. And what was unique about it was the New York Times had decided to write a story about my coming out experience at Goldman Sachs. So my first 3 days being out at Goldman, I was trailed and shadowed by a New York Times reporter. In terms of the core advice I give other transgender people who are in various stages of coming out, actually really isn't advice at all, because since everybody's experience is different, really all you can do is describe your own experience. And if the person identifies with that and gets something out of it, good. And usually they do, because there are enough similarities in corporate coming out experiences where there is overlap. But really, it's just sharing your own story honestly, and just allowing the other person to talk about their situation, and really not give too many concrete suggestions. I believe that self-discovery and self-actualization, which is what a transition is universal in every human being. So in a sense, everybody is transitioning for their whole lives. I'd like to think my book would be good anytime, but now, in particular, with all the anti-trans sentiment out there in society and in the political world, I think it's important to tell these stories, to educate other people, and to show other people that the types of struggles and triumphs I've had in my life are no different than what other people experience. I think a big takeaway from Maeve Rising is that there's not a clean narrative arc to life. Life zigzags. Sometimes life gets better, sometimes life gets worse. But if you stick with it and you're true to yourself, you're likely to wind up in an unexpected place that could very well be beyond your wildest dreams. And that's the place I find myself in today.